everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Brittany.
We have a wide-ranging, very important conversation today. I do want to start with President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It holds his hallmark tax and immigration policies of his second term, and it was delivered a potentially big blow today by the Senate Parliamentarian. She is blocking on Thursday key Medicaid and student loan repayment provisions in the bill. What's your reaction to her move?
Well, unfortunately, this bill is getting less and less beautiful, but there are some good parts of it, and I hope it's going to be fixed in the Senate. So I think it's oversight of the senators, because I just do not believe you cannot write provisions that directly affect federal budget. Actual reconciliation process was designed, never actually designed to increase spending or do tax cuts. It actually was designed to deal with spending reductions. So how can that not be in order? It means that it either wasn't written correctly or it was done intentional, or there is some other reason. So I hope senators will make it work, that we actually can pass this bill and have some growth of the economy, bring some stability and predictability, but also at least incrementally dealing with all of the fraud and abuse in our spending, because we're going on the path of fiscal calamity. We have to deal with some of that stuff, and I think that has to be fixed for that bill to be able for them to pass it in the House.
I do want to talk about who exactly the Senate Parliamentarian is. She's someone most Americans haven't heard of. The role's nonpartisan in nature. Her name is Elizabeth McDonough. Her role is to interpret the Senate chamber rules, especially as they pertain to the reconciliation process. She says this violated the Byrd rule, meaning that they aren't policy rules. They don't pertain to the budget. So you're disagreeing with her characterization. Talk to us about that.
Well, how can something that has hundreds of billions of reduction in spending don't affect our budget? This is hypocritical. It's like when we wanted to skirt the rules, the House said day is not a day. So in our rules, so then we don't have to vote on something that Congress is required to vote on. So it's really very, dishonest to say that. If there are some little words in there, I'm surprised. Sometimes I work with parliamentarians a lot, and usually when I work on legislation amendment, I run it by them. And if they have some words or concerns, sometimes it's just very simple items, you usually address it. So I'm surprised that committees wouldn't address it, because in concept, it's these items that directly affect federal budget, not just a little bit. Hundreds of billions of dollars, of fraud, and overspending. So I think they need to work on fixing it and find a way how to make it work right. But if you look at her ruling, it was very interesting. Her ruling seems very political, because when Democrats ran a lot of spending on discretionary through reconciliation, which didn't even make sense, it never happened before, that it's actually some of the spending they passed, she ruled they were in order, and that is actually never when reconciliation was designed for it. But it seems like every time Republicans are touching something, especially on health care, she rules always that it's not in order, because it seems like that may be her personal views, and he wants, government-controlled health care, which is going bankrupt in the country right now. So because that seems very strange. And if you look at her views and how she was appointed and how she rules on Democrat reconciliation versus Republican, I'm not surprised that some of my colleagues in the House and the Senate call and maybe she should be fired, because she's doing political. She is not nonpartisan, I can tell you, based on her rulings. So they need to either figure out to address it, if there is some word in something, or really get rid of her and find someone who's actually just looking at the letter of the law and rules, not doing political opinions.
I hear how frustrated you are. Democrats were frustrated with her back in 2021 during a debate on the American Rescue Plan. She said that raising the federal minimum wage did not comply with the Byrd rule then. Vice President Harris decided not to overrule her, so the minimum wage bump was taken out. And Senate Majority Leader John Thune said he's not going to overrule her then, or now rather. So how do you think that the Republicans fix what is happening with Medicaid right now? Because that is one of the biggest points of contention when it comes to this bill.
But there is a big difference when you try to regulate businesses through federal budget and reconciliation in mandates, And versus where you actually say, we are going to limit some of this overspend and fraud and abuse, indirect government spending that goes through our mandatory spending. So there is a huge difference when she ruled on items. Of course, that makes sense. You know, the Democrats, a lot of things that actually they were able to pass through reconciliation where they were able to move discretion into mandatory spend. It never happened before. They ruled that it was an order, which was really never meant to be. I understand they went so far they start regulated businesses through reconciliation. So that was not a direct budgetary impact. That was a true policy change. You know, here is we're dealing with where we are funding Medicaid, where states have to be our partners and have skin in the game. They're defrauding the federal government, cooking the book, providing Medicaid to ineligible people, you know, not doing the match, do a scam that Biden called a scam through provider taxes. So the federal government now pretty much paying most of it versus, you know, being a partner. So they're not the partners, and then they overcharge the people and Medicaid, cut services, but get payments at the level of private insurance. What hospitals and insurance get like a private insurance rate and split the profits, but people don't get the benefits, and now we go bankrupt. So this is a direct budgetary item that was actually we are paying through our mandatory automatic spending. So there is a huge difference. If there is something in the wording, sometimes where they brought something like this is applicable to this section and all other sections. So if there is something in the wording like that, you can delete that wording sometimes, but that something should have been worked out with Parliamentarian. I had some amendments in language. I work in the House version, you know, that we fix it. And it was interesting to me because when we sent the bill to the Senate, actually kind of informally was told us so all our language was fine. The language would meet parliamentarian requirements. So there's other
Who told you that? Who told you that? Who
you know,
said
that
hey,
was kind of said to us and informally through the Senate. So like some of the provision I even ran by that. So it's either that was dishonestly said, either something was changed in the Senate, you know, or, you know, for whatever reason, maybe on purpose, not on purpose, or this is just a politics and no one wants to do it and it's a good excuse to take some key provisions. And unfortunately, you know, that's not going to work because it's not going to pass in the House. For them, you know, it's not going to work.
As we sit here right now, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as I said, it seems like he's not overruling this. So there's two options. It's either tinker with the wording, change the wording, or strike out these Medicaid cuts completely. Is there any indication of where Republicans are going to go in the Senate right now?
Well, I know that some senators that I talked to, they're working to fix it. And, you know, but if they strike out these big offsets on fraud and defrauding the federal government and the people in Medicaid, by large cartels making a lot of money on it. I mean, truly, we create healthcare cartels now. You know, then if they're going to do it, it's not going to pass in the House. They are not going to get the vote in the House because we're going to increase significantly spending, and we're going to be increasing, you know, our decrease in revenues, and growth is not going to offset it. So then they will have to go to plan B or C or D, whatever, I don't know at this point, you know, have a more narrow pass, you know, legislation, which I know that a lot of people don't, and we'll deal with some of the extensions of tax cuts later, because ultimately they cannot increase so much, decrease revenue, increase spending at the same time, and didn't deal with spending offsets. I mean, something has to happen there. And if they take Medicaid out, it's not going to be enough even to break even, not to add to deficit.
Democrats say this is blocking more than $250 million worth of cuts to Medicaid. And those cuts, in part, were meant to pay for President Trump's promises here when it comes to expanding the 2017 tax cuts and border security. So without these Medicaid cuts, how are you going to pay for those promises?
I want to make sure that we don't misrepresent what it is. There is no cuts we're doing to Medicaid. I want to just explain what really the House is doing right now. So the states originally were supposed to be partners to do our match. They do the match, and depending on the, you know, the poverty level states, some of them have higher federal match, some lower. So the states that cooking the books, defrauding the federal government, create fake taxes.
I just want to interrupt you for 1 second, just so we're on the same page. When you're saying cooking the books, I mean, name names. Who are you accusing
All
of
of
doing
the
that?
majority of the state cooking the books, including my state, the state of Indiana, is one of the abusers. So majority of the states that have provided taxes.
Are these no-name government officials? I mean, who
No, this
specifically
is
are
the
talking
states.
about?
The state legislature, the state's governors, the one who run in the state. So they would be the states that been using and abusing the system to get money from the federal government. And some of them doing to the point of insanity, like New York. Now they start even giving Medicaid to illegals, which never, allowed to do that. So there are three things that states are doing, since when they don't have a fair skin in the game and pay fair share of the match, they have a perverse incentive then to enroll a lot of people. They have a lot of stakeholders in the states that making money lobbying state legislature, and state legislatures give them perks left and right because they can create the new tax, which will allow, by using federal match, will allow them to make money. The states will make money, the provider like hospital will make money, and the federal government is going to lose money. So they're using it defrauding as a scam. So that's how they get larger federal reimbursements. So the federal government keep increasing amount of spending, but they don't really go even for the benefits. It's really make profits between insurance and hospitals in the states, and legislatures heavily lobbied to do that. So they don't have to use their budget, to complement, to do their fair share of payment. That's why the states are not dealing with Medicaid. That's why they have where seniors in nursing homes don't get the care, but they allow hospitals to use Medicaid dollars to build Taj Mahals that they're supposed to go to nursing home. Billions of dollars. The state of Indiana, actually one of the abusers. My state, a lot of states abuse it. So the provider tax has really been so widespread, and it's become really defrauding, a scam. Biden used to say it's a scam. So we need to stop that. Then we have another thing that Biden invented. That's true insanity. They use a loophole in the Obamacare to allow now automatically for the states to bill federal government and private insurance rate for Medicaid. So they're cutting the benefits, but on top, insurance and hospitals billing at private insurance rate, through the state-directed payments. So we try at least to limit that to Medicare rate. Even they shouldn't be getting them at all. So that's what we're trying to do. That's a true fraud. And then, try to put some requirements so ineligible people are not on Medicaid, and also the people that don't work, that should be working, that not using Medicaid, because it meant for poor people, people with disability, for children, poor children. So that's what was intended, where the state should be a partner of federal government. But when they don't have to pay their part, they are not. Some of the expenses, administrative expenses, pay 100% at the federal level. So they have this luxury computer contracts with some of the lobbyists over there at the state. They pay enormous amount of money. So this needs to stop. So we try to make sure that the states start doing a better job and pay their part into Medicaid. So there is no one there cutting anything. I want to make sure we try to clean up and save Medicaid for the people that actually should be getting it, and better Medicaid.
Congresswoman, I feel really lucky in my conversations with Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate alike. I've talked a lot about Medicaid, and that is the most contentious issue by far in my conversations regarding the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And both sides of the aisle agree that there could be waste, fraud, and abuse when it comes to some people using Medicaid, but the CBO, which is nonpartisan, says that the big beautiful bill that was passed in the House will leave more than 7 million Americans uninsured over the next decade based on the cuts of how they were passed. I mean, are 7 million Americans, more than 7 million Americans who were using Medicaid, is that all waste, fraud, and abuse? Is that more than 7 million examples of that?
So we need to decide what part of insurance is for what. So Medicaid is meant for people with disability. That's what we need to be Medicaid, right? We have to decide where part of insurance it needs to be, right? So in which scope. Then we have a different conversation, what is the people, how people can get affordable insurance and why we don't have affordable insurance. Actually, moving people from Medicaid, from Obamacare, Medicaid became so expensive, would save us probably $500 billion. To the federal budget. That's how bad it is, because states don't even control it because they don't have to. Right now, federal government is writing a blank check and states are running wild. So we're trying to say, like, okay, this is people who are not eligible. We cannot provide Medicaid for people who are here illegally. We need to make sure that people who get this Medicaid, they meet their work requirements, so try to get jobs. So make sure that these people move up in life, not stay and use Medicaid. So this is the things what the CBO is looking. But the big ticket items right now that is really big and why they're important to look, it's where stakeholders, insurance and hospital overbilling Medicaid at rapid rates. That is actually the biggest fraud and abuse in the system that we don't talk enough. They build in Taj Mahal, don't pay taxes, pay a lot of to executives, and allowed to overbill because they have the state-directed automatic, it's like an open credit line where they can just draw the money, and Biden administration just ran it wild. I mean, they ran it wild, used COVID to enrich so many CEOs of these cartels that is unbelievable. Then they buy physician practices further and further. Then under law, physicians even cannot own hospitals, but hospitals can own physicians. They control rural areas, closing hospitals, and every time what we to do something, they threaten legislators and try to intimidate us. But then they don't want hospitals to be owned in rural areas by, doctors. So that seems hypocritical. They don't want to do business, and they don't allow anyone to do business. So it creates scarcity, no access to healthcare, and ability for them to overbill. And that's why a lot of Americans are bankrupt and not getting the best services on healthcare. And we don't have a competition on the market. So it creates a lot of perverse incentives. So we have to fix Medicaid and make it better for people that actually it's meant to be. We need to make nursing homes better. Which actually not even dealt in this bill. It's not even dealt with this bill. Provided taxes on nursing homes were excluded, which one of the biggest abuses in the system. So we need to fix it, but then also we need to fix healthcare. And I hope it could be a bipartisan conversation, because we're going to have to go to Medicaid for all, as Bernie wants, or we'll create more competition for value. We are one of the, we spend more than any developed country in the world per person, and we had way worse outcomes. That's just unacceptable.
I think that's something that a lot of people want to talk about, fixing healthcare in this country. I don't think anyone is too happy with that. I think that can be a bipartisan agreement. I do just want to ask, because I heard you say something that sparked my attention. When you said they're threatening legislators, who's the they and what exactly are they threatening?
Listen, lobbyists, hospitals, lobbyists to close rural hospital. That's what we start moving some stuff. They pretty much bought hospital cartels, almost have every lobbying and legal firm here on their retainer, have army of lobbyists. Actually, there was just a report, I think, in one of the newspapers, maybe Politico or something, they spent $8.5 million just in the last quarter lobbying here. They're running around and try to intimidate my legislator. Oh, if you do something and take any money from cartels that have billions on Wall Street, invest billions in foreign countries, pay no taxes, pay millions to CEOs and their staff, that's where we have now 10 administrators per doctor. They intimidate everyone. Oh, we're going to close rural hospitals. We're going to close rural hospitals. And everyone is afraid, right? They threaten us. And I said, okay, if they don't want to do business, why don't we try to allow physician-owned hospital that will prohibit it to provide Medicare and Medicaid in rural areas or any areas under Obamacare? Why don't we let them do it? You don't want to do business, okay, then why don't you let doctors to do business? People have no access to healthcare in these areas, but they lobby not to allow to do that. So that's a total hypocrisy, and it's a totally lobbying special interest to hold us hostage. They spend 3 times more money on lobbying here than defense lobby, and between healthcare, PBMs, hospitals, insurance, and this is, it's almost impossible to move healthcare. This has become so corrupt, and my legislators need to grow the backbone to deal with that, and they spend so much money on running ads and lies, and unfortunately, it's been working.
Congresswoman, I know one thing from certain based on this conversation is that this is a significant setback for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but President Trump is still, as you and I sit here right now, that could change, but as of now, it seems like the administration wants this still on his desk by the July 4th deadline. This barely passed through the House. It seems to even, as of right now, have a more delicate dance in the Senate, and you said it won't pass in the House if the Medicaid cuts aren't in there. I mean, what are the chances of this making that imposed July 4th deadline to President Trump's desk?
They need to fix this Medicaid fraud. I mean, this is truly insanity. The countries go bankrupt and at least need to bring to something to what we had, at least a break-even situation. You know, at least what we passed in the House, it was with assumption of growth and pretty, significant assumptions, but I hope we'll have that growth, and we need growth. You know, at least it did break even situation where we don't add to deficits, because it's extremely important within the current dire situation with our national debt not to add to deficit. And it's important for the market, and it's important for the economy, and really for our treasury bills and everything else, because it's becoming almost a debt spiral situation if we're going to continue on this path. But I think there are a lot of good parts in that bill that are good, and I think it's important for look at some of the stuff that needs to happen. So I think Senate, if they truly want this bill to pass, they need to fix some of this, the provision that their parliamentarian, told that it was not in order. They can be fixable because they're budgetary provisions. So if they cannot make something in order that directly affect hundreds, billions of dollars of spending, then why is this reconciliation even for? Then it means that they didn't work hard enough, so the Senate needs to work harder to do the right thing and not to be afraid to do the right thing.
Congresswoman, I want to make a complete left turn just for a few minutes and pick your brain about recent activities regarding the situation in the Middle East. President Trump announced that Israel and Iran reached a ceasefire agreement after a really rocky 2 weeks in the region. The United States over the weekend dropped bunker-busting bombs on multiple Iranian nuclear sites. Iran responded with an attack that was symbolic in nature on a U.S. airbase in Qatar, and the ceasefire appears to be holding now. What we do know, though, is that your party seemed a little bit divided on these strikes. I know that you're supportive of them. Some members of your party, not so much. What do you make of what's unfolded in the last couple of days?
Well, I think, listen, I think President Trump understands that peace can be only achieved through strength, and America has been doing a lot of talk and a lot of other presidents and not really doing the work in dealing with Iran. It's very dangerous for countries that finances terrorists, has a very aggressive, offensive ideas, about destruction of countries in the areas, and really anti-American ideas, anti-Muslim ideas, anti-Jews ideas, and there are a lot of aggressive people there in the Middle East and with nuclear weapons. So I think that's something that Iran should have never been allowed to do, which was actually said all of the presidents, not just President Trump, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden had made the same statements that Iran shouldn't have nuclear weapons. Well, President Trump understands that talk is cheap. And, he needs to make sure that Iran is going to get to the table and stop doing what they're doing, because they're getting closer to nuclear weapon. After all of these talks, no one achieved anything. So I think he needs to send the message that is going to be serious, and if Iran is not going to do it voluntarily, that we're going to intervene in this situation. And I think that is, that's something he had to do. So they understood that we're serious. So I hope that they got the memo and they're going to have a negotiations, because Iran is really the most destabilizing country in that region, and really they need to come to senses and stop destroying so many lives. And I think a lot of countries, even in that region, are tired of that, and their finances so many bad people there, it's just not good.
And what do you think an agreement looks like? What do you think diplomacy looks like when it comes to the United States and Iran? What's the next step forward?
Well, I think, the first thing, that president needs to make sure that, Iran is going to give up on the idea of having nuclear weapons. And we need to make sure that Iran reassures us, not just reassures that we have a way to know that, because that's something that they're not being very honest, and there was very little access to the country. And then, it's very difficult to deal with governments that in that, region or some other regions that really, have not very good ideas how they want to treat their people and economy, but we have to deal with them. And ultimately people decide what government they elect, and people decide what the price they're going to be paid for these governments. But then we'll need to have a discussion how Iran could, stop destabilizing the Middle East and finance terrorist groups, and what things we can bring to the table. And I think President Trump is a good negotiator, and so I hope that Iran will want to understand that they can empower their people more, not fighting with everyone. They're a very wealthy country with lots of resources, and people are suffering there because they have bad leaders. And ultimately, that's a choice to make. But for us, the most important thing that they stop financing terrorist group and destabilizing the region and try to initiate wars and try to have weapons. That's the most important thing, I think, for us and for our national interest, because we've been dealing with the Middle East for a while now, and would be nice to not to deal with these wars in the Middle East.
Congresswoman, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for offering your perspective on these really important topics. I hope to have you back on again soon as each situation really develops. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.